Welcome to The Explainer. Today we're going to dig into something that's, well, absolutely essential for every single educator out there. We're talking about building those powerful, positive relationships with parents and the community. And let me tell you, if you get this right, it's a total game changer, not just for your classroom, but for your whole career. Okay, so what we're looking at today is based on some really fantastic materials compiled by Asker Ali Shamoun. He's a continuous professional learning and improvement catalyst at the Teacher and Staff Development Center in Gilgit-Baltistan. And what he's done is put together this incredibly practical step-by-step guide for mastering what can be a really tough part of the job. All right, so here's how we're going to break this down. Think of it like a journey through the school year. We'll kick things off with the why, the power of partnership. Then we'll get into the nitty-gritty how, making that first contact, totally mastering parent conferences, explaining what actually goes on in your classroom, and wrapping it all up with building support from the whole community. Let's get into it. Okay, first things first, we gotta lay the groundwork. Before we get into any of the strategies or tactics, it's so important to understand why this stuff matters. This connection with parents in the community, it's not just some nice-to-have extra. Honestly, it might be the single greatest asset you have as a teacher. I mean, just think about it from the school's point of view for a second. You're on the front lines. You're more than just a teacher in a room. You are the main connection, the day-to-day link between the school as a whole and all the families it serves. You are literally the glue holding that entire crucial relationship together. So what does that relationship, what does it actually look like in practice? Well, the material we're working from is really honest about this. Parent involvement is incredibly powerful, for sure, but it is not always simple. In fact, you'll often hear it described as a bit of a double-edged sword. And this really captures that idea perfectly, doesn't it? On one hand, you have this amazing supportive power. On the other, this intense critical power. It's the exact same passion that can make a parent your absolute biggest fan, that can also turn them into your toughest critic if they think something's wrong. It's an emotional bond, right? So the stakes are always high. The real skill is figuring out how to tap into all that supportive energy while also being totally prepared for the critical side. Okay, so if the stakes are that high, how do you make sure you start things off on the right foot? Well, that leads us right into our first big practical step, being proactive with your communication. This is, without a doubt, your most important tool for setting a positive tone right from the very first day. And this quote, this really gets to the core of it all. Poor performance should never be a surprise to a parent. Think about that. If the first time a parent is hearing about a major problem is on a report card, you've already lost. That trust is gone. The whole point is to make parents your partners in their child's education, and you just don't keep your partners in the dark. And you know what? The process itself is way simpler than it sounds. It's not about bombarding them with emails. It's just a simple 3-step flow. First, you send a quick positive note right at the start of the year. Just introduce yourself, show your enthusiasm. This builds a connection before there are any problems. Then you just get into a regular rhythm of updates. By doing this, if you do have to have a tough conversation later on, you're not starting from zero. You're building on an existing foundation of trust you've already created. All right, now let's talk about the big one, the parent-teacher conference. For a lot of teachers, this is the most formal and, let's be honest, often the most stressful interaction you'll have. This is where all that prep and all those communication skills have to come together. So let's break down exactly how to walk into these meetings with total confidence. You have to remember, before you even say a word about their kid, that parent is forming an impression of you. And that's why professionalism is just non-negotiable. We're not talking about being stiff or formal. It's about showing respect. The way you look, the way you act, your tone of voice, every little thing sends a message that you take this seriously, that you take their child's education seriously. So to keep the conference on track and make it truly productive, you have to ground it in facts. You have to get away from vague feelings and opinions. And that's where a tool like this, a Student Achievement Form or SAF, is just so incredibly valuable. It completely shifts the conversation from, I feel like they're struggling, to here's the data, which is always a much, much better place to start. So here's a quick look at what one of these forms might look like. And there are 2 really important things to notice here. First, look how specific it is. You've got homework completion, test scores, project grades. But second, and this is the really critical part, you see that class average column? The source material we're looking at really hammers this home. Parents always want to know how their child is doing compared to the rest of the class. That one column gives them instant context and answers probably the biggest question on their mind before they even have to ask. Now, having the data is one thing, but the real power is in how you deliver it. Your job here is to be a caring messenger of facts, not a judge. You just present the information clearly, and then, and this is the most important part, you listen. You just stop talking and listen. Because real teamwork, real collaboration, that begins the second you start hearing what they have to say. Okay, moving on. Beyond just grades and test scores, parents are genuinely curious about what actually goes on in your classroom every day. What's it like in there? Pulling back the curtain and explaining your teaching methods is a really powerful way to build even more trust and make that partnership stronger. And here's a fantastic little challenge for you. Try to write down your entire teaching philosophy in 25 words or less. It sounds tough, but it's an amazing exercise because it forces you to be crystal clear. If you can't explain it simply, how can you expect a parent to get it? This helps you boil everything down to one powerful statement that anyone can understand and, more importantly, remember. And check out this example to see just how well it works. My style fosters independent problem solving. I provide the tools and guidance, but students build the solution. Mistakes are celebrated as learning opportunities. Boom! In just a couple of sentences, a parent knows what you value: independence, guidance, and a safe space to make mistakes. They immediately get a feel for your classroom, and that kind of clarity is just priceless. So beyond your big picture philosophy, parents also need the nuts and bolts. Being super transparent about these 3 things is absolutely key: your teaching style, your plan for assessments, and your grading plan. Just explaining the how and why behind your tests and grades right from the start can prevent so many headaches and misunderstandings later on. All right, for this last section, let's zoom out a bit. We've been focused on individual parents, which is crucial. But now, let's talk about building that same level of support across the entire community. This is how you go from being just a teacher in a school to being a truly respected pillar of the community. So when a parent inevitably asks you that question, "What can I do to help?" what do you say? Well, here is probably the most powerful, simple, and actionable thing you can tell them: 10 to 15 minutes. That's it. Just 10 or 15 minutes a day, sitting down with their child to go over what they did in class. It's not overwhelming, it's totally doable, and believe me, it makes a huge, huge difference. The materials we've been looking at list 10 essential things to remember, and we've pulled out 5 here that are just so on point. First, parents will help if they know what to do. That's our 10-15-minute rule right there. Next, bad news spreads quickly, which is why that proactive communication we talked about is so important. This one's a biggie. Parents don't just send their best children to school. That's a huge reminder to always lead with empathy. Then there's a teacher in the audience prevents problems. Get out there, be visible. And finally, always remember that no matter what, you're all moving toward the same goal: helping that child succeed. So that brings us to the end, and we want to leave you with a challenge. We've talked about the power of these partnerships, how to be proactive, how to handle conferences, and how to build community support. But now, all that theory needs to turn into action. So ask yourself right now, what's one new partnership you can build this week? Just one. Because that's where the real work and the really amazing results truly begin.